Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we welcome you to another riveting edition of B30. All things biblical, educational, discussed for your personal benefit. Sorry, I think I had chocolate-covered coffee beans or something. Now, for this week's session, I'm going to try something new, and I'm going to tackle 2 new topics in one sitting. Due to the fact that Christmas, the whole holiday season, family time is drawing near, and I don't know if B30 may or may not take a break next week, but anyways, so let's get right into the first topic. It concerns something that happened in the old Deep South, and it all started in 2009 when an Oklahoma legislator, who so happens to be a conservative Christian, this legislator approved a monument of the 10 Commandments to be built at the State House. And it was privately funded by some of the Republican representatives in Oklahoma. So just to be clear, the hard-working taxpayers of Oklahoma did not foot the bill. But basically, there's this gigantic, gargantuan religious statue on government public property. So naturally, certain legal groups voiced their concern that the sculpture was pretty much unconstitutional because government officials, public servants should remain impartial. And basically, they should not show any kind of favoritism towards their personal beliefs in the public sphere. So what these Christian Republicans are basically doing is they're using their connections and their authority to honor their own religious beliefs. So for you church-loving folk out there, you're probably thinking, I don't see the problem here. I mean, all I see here is Christians in leadership positions making a difference in the secular world. Praise be to God and all that good stuff. But what if the roles were different? And what if, in this case, the government officials had Islamic backgrounds? What if they were successful in erecting a monument of Allah or something? How would you feel then? Just something to think about. Now, back to these Christian Republican representatives. They're probably, patting themselves on the back, thinking they've used human government to honor God and blah, blah, blah. But what they really did was just open the discussion of equal treatment and opportunity for religious groups. So, in recent weeks, a group of Satanists submitted a proposal to erect a $20,000 monument on government-owned property. And may I add, the Satanists, or the satanic group, will certainly abide by the government guidelines. The depiction of Satan will be tasteful, and it will be consistent with community standards. Here are some potential ideas how the Satan monument would look like. It could be an artistic pentagram, or it could be some kind of Satan-centered interactive display for children. So regardless of how you personally think of that satanic statue or proposal, the rational, the progressive individual should not take sides and seriously consider this satanic temple's proposal for what it is. Since they're going through the proper kind of bureaucratic channels, it's the professional and courteous thing to do. But one of those Republican representatives in Oklahoma, however, said that, or when they came across the proposal, they're like, oh, these Satanists belong in the quote-unquote nut category, and that this male Republican representative plans to introduce legislation that would allow state buildings to primarily or only celebrate Oklahoma's Judeo-Christian heritage. So, in other words, this is a pro-Christian state only. No others. Bah, get out of here. Get out. Playing favorites much in a kind of political position? Now, is it just me, or should Christians in a place of authority govern with justice and mercy and not impose their beliefs on others? That's why a more impartial organization came along. They're called the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. They believe the best solution, and probably the most common sense solution, is for the situation is to have no religious symbols on government property, period. This way, no particular religion gets preferential treatment. It's only fair. And if the government is to be trusted to take care of its people, this has to be the way. So what it comes down to is, if you put up a Ten Commandments statue, then out of fairness, you gotta approve the Satanic Temple's pentagram or Satan statue as well. Or, if you don't want a huge Satan statue or pentagram monument, then, to be fair, you have to take down the Ten Commandments thing too. So pretty straightforward, common sense stuff, right? But this whole kind of equality and neutrality concept just isn't sinking in with this Oklahoma Republican representative bunch. Because one of them, whose family helped pay for the Ten Commandments monument to begin with, they also plan to build a chapel, a Christian kind of worship chapel inside the Capitol to celebrate Oklahoma's Judeo-Christian heritage. Oh, geez. Like, when I first heard this, like what's happening in the old South in Oklahoma, this isn't doing 21st century Christianity any favors in terms of public perception. Well, personally for me, I'm not ashamed of being a Christian. I have no problem erecting like some Ten Commandments kind of statue or monument or Jesus statue on church-owned land. That's fine. But when you're placing it on public kind of government property, it's kind of obnoxious to kind of like flaunt kind of Christian symbols, when the reality is Christianity does not necessarily represent the religious diversity of society today. Look, when you place like church symbols, Christian church symbols in public areas, it's kind of like a form of boasting, almost like you're showing off to people like, hey, look at us, we're Christians. We have the connections and power in the old South to make these public statements. Look how righteous we are. Yay! Kind of thing. I'm Christian, and even I find that kind of obnoxious. But hey, what do I know? I'm just, some dude on a podcast. From my own personal stance, and to kind of wrap things up, I'm going to side with the Satanists, the Sikhs, the atheists, and the etc. on this one. I say, take down the Ten Commandments thing. Or you let the Satanists put up their pentagram, because it's all about equal treatment, fairness of all religious viewpoints. Look, I want to outreach and proclaim the gospel in a bold manner like any zealous Christian would, but not like this. Jesus won the hearts of people through genuine love and caring actions. He didn't do it by erecting a Christian symbol on public property. To be honest, it's almost like a sign of arrogance that Christians are better than everyone else. And that is further from the truth. The deal is, the church is not some spiritual museum where perfect people gather and admire each other for their holiness. The church is intended to be a spiritual hospital where sinners, saved or unsaved people gather, they share, they learn, they heal, and they grow together. So if you really want to win over people and be a steady presence in your community, why don't you hold an open house instead and serve refreshments, or offer free childcare and babysitting services so families new to the city or in the neighborhood won't have to go on Craigslist and take their chances hiring strangers who might turn out to be like serial killers or something. What I'm trying to say is, rather than to spend all your efforts building a statue, why don't you rather focus your efforts on letting your neighborhood know that your local church is an accepting place where broken people can feel safe going to? Whew. Kind of went off on a tangent there a bit, so let's bring it back in, and let me just conclude by asking, what do you think, folks? Christian symbols on government property, yay or nay?
And that concludes the first half of this session.
So, moving along, the next topic I want to touch on briefly was, earlier this month, some newscaster on a major American TV network stirred up quite the controversy when she stated in a very confident manner that Jesus was a white man. I don't know if she was genuinely ignorant of the facts, or trying to boost ratings for her network, or
She's into the whole racial typology, and she thinks certain races are more superior than others. But I find her statements concerning on two levels. Well, for one, it's biblically inaccurate to say Jesus was white. And what I mean by white is this kind of perception of a Western European descent, blonde-haired, blue eyes kind of deal. Because Jesus was from the line of David, which means he was an Israeli, he has Jewish descent. What I'm trying to say is Jesus is technically Middle Eastern. So don't be surprised if you realize his skin complexion is either like coffee or mocha brown or the lightest, like a milk latte. So for those who have grown up in that conventional children's Christian church education kind of curriculum, you're used to going through those workbooklets and those memory verses where the visuals depict Jesus as this handsome, fair-skinned guy with a thick but neatly groomed kind of beard. Well, guess what, folks? It's just to help children conceptualize a benevolent person like Jesus. It's nothing but an artistic rendering, which is technically, historically inaccurate. I mean, if you read the Bible before, or skimmed it, or looked at some of the paragraphs or whatever, if you pay attention to the city names, which, say, for example, the New Testament lists, for instance, Nazareth, Bethlehem, Damascus, Capernaum, Alexandria, Antioch, or you skim through the Bible and there's maps at the end, and you look at the regions like Samaria and Judea, these are all cities basically situated between the Mediterranean and Red Sea. So basically the surrounding regions include the present day kind of like Mesopotamia, northern Africa, and a little down the road is the Arabian Desert. So no one should be surprised that Jesus wasn't the traditional European white dude. Which brings me to my second point, where I just don't see how the race of our Lord and Savior is relevant. I'm not trying to be anti-white. I'm not trying to be pro-white. Jesus could be purple, orange, or blue for all I care. What I do care is Jesus came to save, and thank God he didn't discriminate. I guess certain people like to feel extra special or favored if Jesus was the same race as them, as if God likes them better than other ethnic groups, but who cares? I mean, that totally misses the point about the history, the deity, and the full humanity that was Jesus. What we should care about is how Jesus was truly revolutionary and way ahead of his time. And what I mean by that is, I'm talking after reaching his early 30s and he started his public ministry, he practically became homeless. He lived in spare bedrooms and backyards, or whoever would put him up for the night. He ate handouts. He had no job. He literally owned the clothes on his back. And let me remind you, deodorant wasn't as advanced as it is in the modern day. So when Jesus walked around in the hot Palestinian sun everywhere he went, it's safe to assume the Son of Man most likely walked around with dirty, dusty feet and sweat-stained armpits. So a far cry from how you would picture him in your head, or how statues and cathedrals or whatever would kind of depict him as. So the point of my kind of skewed, liberal, hippie depiction of Jesus is that race, social prestige, and public image was not Jesus' concern at all. Because he was kind of a guy that people would expect him to be a certain way, but when he came, he totally was not. So, for all intents and purposes, Jesus was this homeless-looking guy. He's claiming to be God. He's challenging and questioning rabbis and priests with his vast knowledge and wisdom, biblical knowledge and wisdom, which is surprising for a dude who's only in his early 30s and he has no formal education. So when the Jewish community was expecting this spiritual and political messiah of noble birth, and they're probably picturing him riding on a white horse to lead this revolution against the Roman Empire, what they got was this working class carpenter dropout from some hick boony town countryside village, and he rides in on he rides in on a donkey. So again, totally not what people expected. And he brought this philosophy of love and submission, and to willingly die at the hands of his oppressors. So he's basically telling people, I'm not promising you any glorious earthly victory or world domination. Pretty unheard of. And he didn't really hang with the upper religious class, like the rabbis' kids or the priests. He hung out with fishermen, aka the manly roughnecks, who most likely used a lot of colorful language when they were out on the waters, doing their thing, making a catch. And Jesus got in trouble when he went to wedding banquets, because he would have wine and stuff. And he once went to a wedding banquet during a fasting season, and he and his disciples got questioned about their moral discipline. I think that was in like the book of John, chapter 2, if my memory serves me correctly. But in a nutshell, that's what the Jesus of the Bible looks like. He wasn't this clean-cut, squeaky, slick politician in a dope suit with like pearly white teeth, and when he grins there's like a sparkle. That's not Jesus at all. But Jesus is this rugged, no nonsense, roll up your sleeves, let's get to work kind of guy. And his ideology was just ahead of his time. He taught people that every human life had worth. Whether you're a leper or a prostitute or a tax collector, you don't live to survive and conquer other people, which is absurd idea, because back then you either conquer or be conquered. You're either a slave or a slave owner. It's a pretty black and white existence during that first century era. Here's the kicker. I've been describing Jesus as this kind of sinless, always doing the perfect thing. But let me remind you, he is all those things. But he was also a very human, emotionally expressive kind of guy. For example, he got super pissed when people were changing or exchanging money and doing business outside the worship temple. He would get disappointed and bummed out when his disciples fell asleep while he went away to privately pray in a garden. I mean, he bawled his eyes out when he found out this Lazarus guy died and they wanted him to raise him. He's also a very kind of honest dude. Like, he questioned and doubted God when he wanted to back out of saving humanity. And then there's this whole classic line, if it is possible, Father, take this cup away, which is basically saying, I don't want to really do this. I kind of want to back out. I don't want to die, like on the cross and be humiliated kind of thing. And he also experienced a whole other array of emotions. Like, he was alone and he felt helpless when he actually went through with dying on the cross, saying that classic line, oh God, Father, why have you forsaken me kind of thing. So, fairly human, emotionally in tune kind of guy. Look, if you don't want to believe that Jesus is the Son of Man and all that rose from the dead stuff, that's fine, whatever, I can't make you. But generations after his earthly departure, many believed in his vision and his claims that he was, equal to God. And what's weird is these people were willing to die for what he stood for. So if you want to call this whole Jesus resurrection thing a hoax, that's fine too. It's a free country. You can believe whatever you want. But here's the thing. Why would people die for a hoax? I mean, if this was all a big prank, no one would commit to a prank to the point of being mauled by bears and lions and wolves in a coliseum, unless these kind of Christian believers were completely delusional or insane. But when hundreds and thousands of people get persecuted and get thrown into the Colosseum to die in the name of Christ, either this mental illness thing or prank is a widespread epidemic, or maybe is it that far-fetched to think that Jesus and his teachings were real, and that dominant empires of that time period were so desperate that they were trying to hold back something truly revolutionary. So I guess the whole point of going off tangent about Jesus and how he is depicted in the Bible, I guess I'm trying to illustrate how the racial and ethnic background of Jesus is noteworthy, but it really doesn't play a significant role in how he impacted the world. So instead of asking if Jesus was white, maybe you should be asking yourself questions like, why did he behave the way he did on earth as recorded in the Bible, and what does he want me to do with the example he left that's recorded in the Bible? And if you're truly fascinated with this historical Jesus character, how can I one day kind of meet him? Okay, I just kind of steamrolled through a whole bunch of stuff, so I'll leave you to drink it in, soak it up in your brain, and let's just end it off right here. So thanks for listening, and goodbye.